Thank you. I'll multitask while we do this. Where did we meet Chuck for the first time? Was it South by?
Maybe, or Blog World or something.
Yeah, so somewhere along the digital road, we ran into each other. His most recent book, and I'm sure there will be many more to come, around digital marketing analytics, in my opinion, is the best primer you could start with in terms of understanding how to listen, how to understand the basic fundamentals of data. And I really think that, especially every 3M'er here should consider picking up a copy. It's definitely a worthy read, and just to get started. It's not the end-all to end-all of all things digital analytics, but it's definitely a solid foundation. Chuck works with WCG. They've done a little bit of foundational work for some of our business groups around the SCOLA process and helping facilitate that listening foundation. So with that, Chuck, take it away.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You know, I don't think I've ever given a talk where I've got like 2 screens here and 2 screens here. I'm like, my ADD is going in overdrive on like what screen I should look at. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate the plug for the book. I'm going to take you through some digital analytics trends. These are things that Ken Burberry, my co-author, and I discovered when we were going through the process of writing the book, and of course, working with clients every day. So when I started my career about 10 years ago doing traditional media research, this was typically the reaction I'd got when I'd come in the room and introduce myself as an analytics person. When I started, analytics and measurement were the first budgets to go or to be dramatically slashed. But now, thanks to the explosion of social and digital media, every time I walk into the room, it's more like, thumbs up, this guy's going to tell me all about how my customers are behaving online. So we all know that the communications landscape is changing. That's not why I'm here. I'm happy to talk to people about how we see the landscape to be changing, but what I'm going to specifically talk about is how the research field is changing to match that new communications landscape. Social and digital media is a 24/7, 365 focus group. It's a treasure trove of information about how key stakeholders, note I didn't just say customers, are behaving. And it's, when mined well, gives us an opportunity to develop content that's more targeted and will ultimately perform better than ever before. So getting into the trends, how are research professionals like myself evolving and innovating in the market to match those new communications needs of companies? You know, I talked a little bit about how social channels represent this new frontier. It's real time, it's open, it's unfiltered. There are open and engaged communities that we can mine. It's a great early warning system for competitive intelligence. I'm not going to talk about crisis here today, but the value that mining social data ahead of the crisis has is tremendous. Happy to talk about that during a break. And you just think about your day-to-day activities, right? I conduct a Google search. I like something on Facebook. I share something on Twitter. I create a pin on Pinterest. I'm an active pinner. No. I'm creating a digital footprint for a brand or somebody like myself to go in and mine and understand. Unfortunately, there's a lot of noise to filter through. There's plenty of valuable signal. And I'll talk a little bit about the growing trend that is hiring people like me within brands in just a second. So getting into some of these trends, you know, I started all digital in late 2006, and at that point, if you would have told me Radian 6 years later, 5 years later, would sell for $325 million, I would have told you were insane. But the space has evolved tremendously. Unfortunately, these tools, social media listening tools, are not an end-all, be-all solution. They don't tell you everything there is to know about your customer. So the way we like to think about this is sort of in a digital data supply chain kind of way, right? So what are the elements that I need to understand, and then go out and find tools that help me identify and gather that data. So a helpful way to frame this up is think about developing your analytics toolbox. So social media listening tool is definitely a part of it. I'm not going to give a plug or a preference for any one of them. I'm happy to talk offline about what my preferences are in that space. But you have to think about engagement tools. So Sprinkler, Spreadfast, whatever the tool is that you're using to publish and not only gather metrics on, and not only that, but gather metrics on how the community is performing. Influencer analysis, I'll talk about that in a minute. Audience and content analysis, these are two places that are seeing tremendous growth. It looks a lot like the early days of social media listening platforms. There are a number of tools out there that do much, much more sophisticated content analysis than you can do simply by looking at your own content on Facebook, and also a deeper level of understanding about who your audience is and what they care about. And then lastly, search analytics. Again, you don't need me to belabor the point about the connection between search and social. It's there, it's prevalent. You have to be looking at how the social conversation translates into a search, translates into activity on a website or an owned property. Of all the different kinds of ways you can conduct listening, there's really only two models that are emerging, right? So you have listening for strategic planning purposes, and strategic planning could be a marketing program, it could be a PR program, it could be an event, whatever the case may be. And then you have listening for content development, and this is sort of all the rage right now. Scott and I were talking and loathing the Oreo case study during the break, and that case study really highlighted real-time marketing. In my point of view, there is no such thing. There is somewhat real-time or semi-real-time marketing, whatever term you want to use. What's that? Near real-time, right. There is a great opportunity to, of course, listen to what the community is saying, identify what those trends are, and then develop content on the back of it to match the community needs. I know there are a number of brands in the room, and we work with several on a daily basis, and no legal team that I've ever encountered moves fast enough to develop content in real time and publish it with the kind of speed that's necessary to capitalize on those trends. It takes a lot of proper planning. One of the things that we've talked about forever is the need for the community manager and the analyst to really blend into one position. A community analyst, if you will. Somebody that knows enough about content, that can maneuver in and out of the tools, but also can look at the data and make sense of it. We're a little ahead of the curve there. I don't think that's necessarily a very popular position out there, or even a person with that kind of skill set really exists. But to develop content in real time based on listening findings, that's what I think where we need to get to. Ken and I started and became friends in 2009 when we talked about how important it was for brands to take advantage of digital data outside of the PR and marketing context. PR and marketing is what we live every day. It's very difficult to break out of that box. But digital data has application outside of that. It has application for HR. It has application for product development. It has application for sales. It has application for customer service, right? Everybody is familiar with the social customer service case studies like Delta and Samsung. They use digital data in a different way. They use it for PR and marketing purposes, of course, but they're listening to how the customer is talking, reaching out to them, engaging with them, solving their problems, and then most importantly, measuring the performance of that activity on the back end. I hate labels for label's sake, and social CRM is one of those to me. I think we'll get to a place where CRM just evolves, or CRM platforms evolve to the place where we can easily incorporate the mass of unfiltered that is digital and social data. There are a number of tools that are getting closer, but we're still quite a ways away from being able to successfully integrate that information with existing CRM platforms and really learn something from it. Companies are beginning to hire internal resources, people like me. I would challenge you, if you're thinking about hiring an analyst to join your team, think about 4 different things. Think about where they're going to sit in the organization. And so you'll probably ask me what my preference would be. It actually depends. By the way, that's the greatest part about being an analytics guy. I can answer it depends a lot, and I'm usually right. But think about it in 4 ways. So where they sit in the organization. So it could be market research, it could be PR, it could be Marcom, could be market research. I've seen it work successfully in all those areas. My personal preference, if you twisted my arm hard enough, I would tell you that it makes sense to put them with market research people. The ability to test online and offline is a really powerful combination. Think about what the role is going to be. My assumption is you're not just going to stick them in a room and ask them to be a social media listening jockey all day where they're just sitting on the platform listening to conversations. That'd be a really terrible use of a resource, and that person, if they had any ambition at all, they'd be gone in 6 months. You have to think about sort of what their future role would be, because as mainstream as social is getting, analytics is still a little bit behind the curve. We're trying to catch up to all the technology that's out there to us. And then think about what their function is going to be. Again, probably not going to be just a report builder, right? Are they going to be a person that's going to develop insights? Or are they going to be working with individual business units to help understand their problems, go out and see if there's a way they can solve it through social and digital analytics? This is my shout out to Mr. Mason. 2 years ago, if you would have asked me what I thought of command centers, I would have told you complete waste of money, a total time suck. Do not do it. Mason, a couple of years ago at an event that we were both at, was asked this very similar question. And I think you said something like, they're valuable in the context of providing a rallying cry for the organization to understand the importance of digital and social and listening to customers. And I'm like, damn, he's right. And in that context, I think they're valuable. As a pure analytics tool, no. There are technologies out there that offer you a much more scalable approach, a dashboard on the screen of each individual practitioner so they can understand the context of what's happening to them or for them at any given point. They don't need to go to a special center and gather information. Measurement finally becomes integrated. Spent all my career talking to communicators, and most of the time in some form or fashion during the course of the meeting, they'll say, boy, this program really needs to be integrated. Well, it's about time that measurement gets to the same place. So I talked about having the digital and social analytics toolbox before. Those are great sort of inputs to the scorecard, and you could come up with metrics across all of those different areas. A helpful way to think about it is breaking your scorecard down into the 4 A's. So looking at awareness metrics. So things like impressions and total reach and fan growth and all those scoreboard-related metrics. Then think about assessment. So how often am I being considered by the core customer versus my competitive set? Then action, conversion, of course, however you define conversion within your own company. And then lastly, ambassadorship. How successful are we at converting our customer interactions into somebody that's going to be a continual buyer of the product? Analytics is going hyper-local. We're getting a lot of pressure now to not just understand the macro consumer behavior, but I want to know what's happening in St. Paul, Minnesota. What do my customers in that geo say when they're engaging with my product? What do they want to see from the product? Did they have a terrible experience in one of our stores? Technology exists now for us to be able to look at that micro level, even more narrow than that even. But looking at sort of the micro behavioral trends next to the macro behavioral trends really gives you a 3D perspective on how your customers are behaving every day and allows you to more closely or more narrowly target your content to reach those people. We talk a lot about forensic analytics at WCG, and let me tell you a little bit about what I mean by giving an example. So, social listening is great. Tracking, likes to a page, great. Well, I may like the Verizon page, but I also like 20 other things. Do you understand what those 20 other things are? And oftentimes the answer is no. We know that they like the page. We know they generally like Verizon or whatever the brand is, but we don't know what else they care about. I like Verizon, but I also like hip-hop music, and I like traveling, and I love the city of London. Philip. Can I understand the customer at a much deeper level? This is what I was speaking to before about audience analytics. Social segmentation is going to be one of those things that everybody's talking about it now, but it'll become a big thing in the very, very near future. This is a sample for you, just to give you some sense. This is some dummy data to understand sort of how our customers are clustering together, so we can understand what the primary attribute is, just by understanding who they follow, what kinds of content they share. We know what they're also passionate about, what their consumption moments would be, if it's a CPG brand. We also know the demographic attributes. People tip that off now more than they've ever done before. And we also know some additional things like, they love free music downloads, and they like bikes. Think about this as sort of the Red Bull model, right? If you follow Red Bull on social media, you know that they very rarely talk about the energy drink. They care more about what the community is interested in, extreme sports being a great example. And then lastly, and probably most controversially, I guess, in this day and age, influencer analysis is not synonymous with clout. Invariably, every conference I go to, somebody says, what is your opinion of clout? Now it's turning into, what is your opinion of clout and peer index and cred, and I don't even know. Most of them are garbage. The social scoring is totally useless. One of the things I would challenge you to do is not necessarily go out and build your own algorithm, although that'd be great if you did, is to think about how you measure influence. Is it sharing activity? That could be one component. Is it reach? That could be another component. Obviously, relevancy would be one thing you'd want to look at. So the amount of content that I'm creating versus somebody else or about another topic. And think about how you can go out and get that data, because a little known fact, and very rarely talked about, is the data that cloud is gathering or any other tool is gathering to come up with those scores is all publicly available to you. They've just aggregated it in one place, made it easy for you. Don't hit the easy button in this case. You have to know at a deeper level who is actually influential to the brand. So I mentioned, where did this come from? It came from a lot of client work over the last several years with between Ken and myself, and obviously doing some research on the space ahead of time. The book's currently available on Amazon. I'll offer one other thing. Ken and I are not taking a dime for the book. All proceeds are going to charity. My particular charity is Superhero Kids. They help kids with rare blood disorders and cancer, and they're part of Dell Children's Hospital in Austin. So if we can't get behind analytics, I think we can get behind helping kids, right, with some rare diseases. Thanks.